Hello, so I'm gonna do a little video on letting go of guilt. I am, for the first time in my memory, I can remember today I used a distraction technique to work my way through a craving. So I obviously that's not a new thing. Everybody does it. Everybody's got that, that you distract yourself and then the craving goes away. I had not done that before, so this is a new process for me. I normally just give in to it and then move on. But the kiddies had some sort of whipped cream, and they had it on some fruit, and I just had the fruit part, but there was a bit of me that kind of thinking about it, and I just went and did something else. So that was a really good move for me, where I've got like a space where our front door is, where kind of stuff gets chucked. So I I sat down and I kind of worked my way through the pile. Basically, I'm just waiting for the shopping to arrive, so I couldn't quite yet go to bed in terms of getting the kiddies to bed. I just sort of had to wait up for the shopping to arrive. So it was a really good positive move for me, and I'm doing this video as another one of those positive moves just to distract myself. So the kiddies have just gone to bed. It's Saturday night, so it's quite late they've gone to bed. I don't like to pressurise them to get into bed on a Friday and a Saturday. They're normally in bed earlier on a Saturday than they are on Friday, just because they're tired by that point. So I'm now, I've got a bit of time to myself, and the temptation that past me would be that I would just eat as a way of maximising our relaxation time and all that kind of stuff. So I am distracting myself by doing something positive, which is to talk about letting go of guilt. What I'm going to do, I'm going to read this article out. It's quite a long one, but I know how much I really enjoy watching a video that's just long and talking about concepts that you can just kind of lose yourself in, and you can kind of have it on in the background and not have to kind of concentrate too much on it. So this is the type of video it's going to be. Okay, so letting go of guilt. Turn down the volume of the harsh voice telling you that you're useless. Turn up the volume of the understanding someone who really cares and can forgive, says Margaret Miles Bramwell. So this is a little article by Margaret Miles Bramwell, and it's also in this one here, which is March/April 2017 in the Slimming Well magazine. This is a Slimming magazine, and you're reading it for delicious new recipe ideas. You also want to be inspired by slimmers who have tried everything there is to try and who finally found the answer with food optimizing, and for the latest health and fitness advice. You'll find all these things and more within these pages. But for those of you whose weight has been and still is a major factor in spoiling a large part of your life, you'll need more. You need to understand why each journey to slimness that you embark upon, a journey that starts out so full of hope, ends in despair. It's a huge subject and couldn't be covered in one issue, but you need to start by understanding about guilt and the need to forgive yourself. Without forgiveness, the same patterns that have led you unerringly to each slimming disaster will simply repeat themselves. No matter how generous and easy food optimizing is, no matter how many recipe ideas you read, nothing changes if nothing changes. Learning to forgive yourself and shed the burden of guilt and excess weight is a change that you need to and can make right now. This is a subject that few people truly understand. Many psychologists who understand the theory appear to be unable to relate it to reality when it comes to weight, body and food issues. For 46 years, I've studied these issues, and I've been privileged to talk to and to help thousands of overweight people. Perhaps most importantly, since childhood, I too have suffered these problems. I can assure you that I'm one of the few who understand. One of the key things I have learned is that forgiveness is paramount to your success. Then it goes on to repeat. So I think that was really good. It's this bit here, which I will repeat again. It's just that, it's like that hurdle you've got to come across. So it's, without forgiveness, the same patterns that have led you unerringly to each slimming disaster will just simply repeat themselves. No matter how generous and easy food optimizing is, no matter how many recipe ideas you read, nothing changes if nothing changes. So it's almost like you can't get past that next hurdle. So no matter how much you pump yourself full of motivation, unless you're willing to forgive yourself and shed the burden of guilt, then you're not capable of making new changes. So then the next section talks about in denial. Guilt is one of our biggest self-sabotage techniques. When we feel guilty, we are in pain, so much so that sometimes we can go into denial. We deceive ourselves, in fact. We convince ourselves that we've been good. But those damned scales still say we haven't lost weight. We've put it on. Because we are so convinced, we in turn become convincing. Those who might have been able to help may be deceived too. And when this happens, they become unable to help us. When we don't lose weight, we can become angry with ourselves, our parents, our consultant, God, anybody. Or we become passive and defeated and don't have the energy to make the effort. Or we pretend we don't care, it's all a big joke. Whichever way, we give strong hidden messages to people who could help us through this to back off and leave me alone. We don't follow the eating plans, don't count sins properly, we don't bother to exercise, and we have a long list of excuses as to why it isn't our fault. We don't stay for the real help in image therapy, we just weigh and go. Things deteriorate even further. We start to regain weight we have lost, and finally we stop coming to group. When we feel guilty, we dislike or even despise ourselves. The conversation we have in our heads goes something like this. You idiot. You're so weak. You're hopeless, useless. It's as though we are two people. One is like a severe and overcritical parent, harsh, cruel and judgmental, while the other is childlike, vulnerable and believing. The sneaky part is we often have this conversation without realizing it. It happens subconsciously outside our awareness. The subconscious mind is not like the conscious one. With our conscious mind, we are able to reason, use logic and sort fact from fiction. Compared with that, our subconscious is a pretty simple affair. It doesn't have the same reasoning and logical powers. It accepts and stores messages about us, true or false, that we may have mistakenly believed at the time to be fact. Yet it is very, very powerful. So for me personally, I think the bit that's most interesting in that is that, where was it? When we feel guilty, we are in pain, so much so that sometimes we can go into denial. So in terms of we are not willing to accept that what we're doing to set ourselves is not helpful. So because we feel bad about how we've behaved, we just pretend that it's not even there at all. And so much so that we're not even aware that we're not pretending that it's not there. It just blocks itself out. Yeah, we have ways in which we speak to ourselves where I wouldn't say I call myself an idiot. I wouldn't say I'm so weak or hopeless or useless, but I think I have ways in which I kind of don't let myself try out stuff. So I wouldn't necessarily have the confidence to do things because I feel like I wouldn't be able to achieve them, and I would feel my head likes to tell me that probably shouldn't try just in case it doesn't go to plan. So those are the sorts of things I'd probably say in my head. Okay, so the next also there's a lady, she's letting go of guilt. She's standing by a river and she's letting go of balloons, and on her balloons are written guilt. The next piece is called self-fulfilling prophecy. This power can be harnessed in a positive way. Many of the techniques used in image therapy help you to tap into your subconscious, or it can be a destructive force in our lives. If we tell ourselves often enough, or others tell us, that we are useless, weak, stupid, and so on, we actually start to believe it at this deeper, powerful level in our subconscious. These messages may have been formed early in our lives, before our character was fully developed, and they can become a kind of script for the way we play out our lives. Without knowing it, we tend to be selective about the things we hear, and only remember those things which reinforce these early negative messages. So when we start to tackle the difficult problem of changing some well-established habits, for example, eating in a different way, we may already believe we are destined to fail, and this belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think, that's we have a perception of ourselves, and we think that that's how life is going to be, and we sort of subconsciously force it so that our life is how we think it's going to be. Guilt about past failures only serves to reinforce this destructive self-belief. Your self-esteem is diminished. The confidence you have in your ability to succeed as a slimmer is battered. The pain is real. It may not be a physical pain, but it's no less debilitating. Sounds depressing, doesn't it? The good news is, though, you can change. You may not be able to change other people's minds, but you can change your own. And therein lies your power. Let's talk about these past failures. Do you believe it was all your fault? Do you believe that it's because you are weak, stupid, useless? Read on. In our society today, rich by world standards, it's the easiest thing for someone to become overweight. Imagine a child raised in a loving family. This child is given food by its parents, sometimes inappropriately when the child is not actually hungry for food. In other words, these kind, well-meaning parents mistakenly believe that more food is required when the baby or child is hungry for a hug or is simply thirsty. This mistake happens many times until the child believes it is food that is required to satisfy the need it feels, or the child is given sweets, chocolate, crisps, all the things the parents have come to believe are treats, naughty but nice. If the child then becomes overweight, this same concerned family starts to withhold food and treats. Sheer torment begins. Food becomes an issue, a battleground. Maybe you've had a weight problem since childhood. Maybe you can no longer read your needs correctly. Or perhaps you reached adulthood as a slim person. But as you became older and your lifestyle changed, you became slightly less active. You started to eat out more and eat more convenience foods. You didn't even realize you were taking in far more calories than you used to, yet using up fewer. And at first the change in your weight may have been hardly noticeable. But by the age of 35 or 40, the effects had become clearly visible. So for me personally, the one there is the bit where my mum is incredibly kind. She's a really kind person, but she doesn't half give you food instead of anything else. So she's incredibly good to me now, because obviously she knows I'm slimming well, and I've been for a little while, and she's very supportive to me. So she's, she doesn't buy me biscuits, doesn't buy me these things, and she's very kind and buys me watermelon instead, or, she buys me different types of things. So, but I think very much so when I was younger, that was her way of making sure we were happy and, fed, really, that we would have food. So I'm very conscious and aware that I must make sure that I don't do the same for my own children, that I make sure that I make sure that their lives are full, make sure they have lots and lots of different ways in which they can engage with life rather than just food. Food is a lovely part of our world, but there's so much more, and so I feel like it's quite important that not to take the food away, but to enrich in other ways, make sure that there's plenty of other different types of experiences. So the next section is called the diet trap. At some point, for all of us, the first serious attempt to lose weight is made. We embark on our first ever diet. By this stage in our lives, we have been bombarded with information and advice, often confusing, contradictory, and inaccurate. The most common advice is, if you want to lose weight, you simply must eat less. This is often supported by calories count, so count calories. It's nearly right, but nearly right ends up sending us so awfully wrong. So we go on a diet for days, weeks, or even months, and life becomes a miserable existence. We are hungry, permanently hungry. We do, however, feel martyred and good about our iron will for as long as we can survive the torture. If you don't have issues around food in childhood, you'll certainly get them now. The hunger, the deprivation, the torment, and then we stop. We go off the diet. Bliss. But horror of horrors, the weight goes back on. Who in their right mind is going to put themselves through that nightmare scenario again? Someone desperate, that's who. Because what often happens is that we then put on more weight than we lost and reach a size we've never experienced before. Pure fear then drives us to start the vicious cycle all over again. No wonder some permanently give up the battle. They're sick of the guilt of repeated failure and appalled by how big they think the sacrifice has to be in order to lose weight. I just quickly step in there and think, now I remember when I was at my very heaviest and I felt absolutely petrified that I was losing weight for Slimming World, but I was still stuck in this body that was huge and I couldn't get out of it fast enough. You know, it would have been lovely if I could have just unzipped my fat, taken it off, done. But it was almost cathartic in a way to have this body where I've been in denial for so long that I've ended up being a size 16 to an 18. I'm bulging out of my trousers and I'm stuck in this huge body and I feel weighted down and I can't take it off. It was almost, I liken it almost to being pregnant, where you're absolutely huge and you're really heavy and you've got a baby inside you and you are ready to pop and you are still got like 2 months left and you have to like live in this body that's full of aches and pains and full of fear, because especially with my first child, when I didn't even know what it was like to give birth, I was petrified. And it's almost, I feel like that when it was the fear of having this weight on me that I had to now live with until I could start to take it off again. And now I've taken most of it off, I feel more comfortable, but I'd sort of forgotten about that bit, the absolute fear, because you're desperate. You don't, but you're not going to get it quick. It has to be a slow process. So yeah, pure fear that drives us to start the vicious cycle again. The fear of the fact that you're in this body and you're stuck, and you can't just get out quickly. You have to now make a conscious decision to make a change in your lifestyle that will allow you to not have to go through that cycle again. So food optimizing is so generous and effective a system that many people feel that they've found a miracle when they discover Slimming World. That alone can be enough for some, but others whose journey to success will take longer, or whose negative messages about themselves are stronger, can still relive the old scenarios. Many people still put themselves under pressure without realizing it. They are afraid of flexible sins, afraid to do anything they believe will slow down their weight loss, in fact terrified of the things that will mean long-term success. The scenario varies, but the process is the same. You must find a way to stop the misery, and the best way to do that is to break the cycle and forgive yourself. So yeah, I think that was a very honest article by Margaret, and I think it was a really good look into it, because so often these things are skirted around and glossed over, and I suppose that's because lots of it's about being in denial. And if you look at actually what's required of you, and it's not like a hard, as I say, it's not a drudgery that you have to go through. It's a reawakening of yourself. It's being supportive of yourself. It's allowing you to succeed, and it's not getting in the way of yourself. There's a little bit down the bottom here which is called Set Yourself Free, which is in this like a little box at the bottom that I shall read out. No normal, healthy person enjoys suffering. Instead of criticizing yourself or deciding not to suffer any longer, congratulate yourself on being normal and healthy. When you make a mistake, when you're not as perfect as you'd hoped, instead of telling yourself that you ruined everything, that you've blown it, say to yourself, How fascinating. I wonder what chain of events led me to stop counting my sins, or whatever your heinous crime has been. As a little joke, I think. I don't know whether it's good. I'm never very good at doing. I think when people are jokey about things, it kind of. But no, I think it's just. I'm just a very serious person. If you can work on understanding that, you can give yourself advance warning and protect yourself better in the future. Begin the healing process that is so deserved and so necessary by forgiving yourself. It wasn't your fault. You did all of this to yourself outside of your awareness. You didn't know this was what you were going to do. You can now stop blaming yourself for those past failures. Tomorrow is a new day. Let it be the start of your new life without all this guilt and pain. Let your sense of humour work its magic. Take yourself more lightly and the task in hand more seriously. Let the success come. Allow yourself to imagine, to revel in the pure, unadulterated joy of achievement and the ecstasy of success. And I think that's exactly there, isn't it? That's that bit where you can take off your veil of guilt and you can actually look at why things are happening, so that you can provide yourself a key as to why you are doing what you're doing. Again, I find that incredibly helpful. I find that bit where you can go, okay, what's the feeling behind this craving? Why would I want this? What happened 3 hours ago that would have sort of set off this cascade of cravings? I'm very conscious now that if I look at something, I'm very aware that it'll bite me later, if you know what I mean. So I have to be cautious and make a statement there and then. I'm often talking to myself out loud. I either say, this is not for me, this is for somebody else, and sometimes I go as far as writing their name on it, so that my brain knows that it is not mine, somebody else's, so that I can kind of help myself in the future. I see myself very much as a past me and a future me. Like, obviously I'm now, but this, I can do things now that will help the future me, and the future me will be thankful to this me for helping her help herself through the processes. So, for example, little processes where, let's think of something quite useful, a little bit, because obviously there's washing up things usefully, but I was thinking about food wise. Yeah, there was some fruit loaf that the kiddies had and they wanted, and they opened it. I'd managed very well not to eat it, and I even asked my daughter if she could put her own butter on it so that it wouldn't be in my hands. Fruit malt loaf with butter on is something that I would have very much eaten. But I asked her to do that, and that's the kind of the past me helping the future me. I know that that's going to be an issue for me, so that I don't play around with it. I just say, no, I'm just not going to do that. There's no need for me to touch that. Let's find a way not to. And if there's things in the house, I make sure I hide them quite successfully away from myself, so that I can say, no, I'm not having them, and I put them away, and then I tend to forget about them, and I don't know they're there, and I've hidden them so thoroughly that I don't accidentally come across them when I'm looking for my spices or something like that. Because that's another way you can kind of self-sabotage yourself, where you sort of think, well, I'll put them there, and you don't hide them well enough, and then you're there faced with them on your moments when you're I wouldn't say in your weak moments, that's the wrong term. I would say in your more vulnerable points, when you're looking for support via food. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there. I would be fascinated to know what you felt about that video, and what you kind of, if it kind of awakened any thoughts about it, and all that kind of stuff. It's always interesting just to pick apart these ideas, just to think about if there can be a better way that they can work, or if you've taken these ideas but moved them on a bit more, or maybe, you know, different ways in which they've helped or haven't helped. And whether it was okay me just reading the article from a magazine and kind of responding to it, whether that was a bit, or, you know, whether that was a bit too, I don't know, I have no way of describing that, but a bit too whatever the word might be in the future. Okay, I'm going to stop that there, and I shall upload that, and then I'm going to make myself a hot drink, and I've given myself half an hour out of, and that's given me half an hour there I'm not having eaten things. I can just make myself a hot drink and a sensible amount of food instead of just shoving in what I can find in the kitchen. See you in a bit, guys. Lots of love.